So Gary, first, always great to see you, and I really appreciate you making the time to share your story and what the planning process looked like. Before we actually get into the planning process and the experience of working together, maybe can you tell me a little bit about where you were before we started working together? Even before you thought to start working with me and my firm, what was going on in your life, in the research you were doing beforehand?
Well, I would say it probably goes back 5 years. That was when I really began to feel like I'm feeling burned out. I've sort of had it with corporate life, and I mean, I was doing fine, right? But I was beginning to think that I really was beginning to look forward to having the freedom of retirement. But I also didn't feel like I was anywhere near financially ready for it, not based on any evidence that not based on anything I was really able to know based on analysis or anything like that. Um, but I was just beginning to really look forward to it. And then about 4 years ago, I then got a new job and I really enjoyed the job and I was really excited about it. And I began to realize that it wasn't that I was sick of working, it's just that I was tired of my job. And that was great for like another 3 years or so until I began to feel burned out again. And so, I had done a whole lot of analysis on my own. And really, what that analysis did was made me feel like, oh man, it's going to be another 5 years till I can retire. So I was feeling a little bit frustrated, but thinking I was just being realistic.
I kind of remember when you and I had our initial email exchange, some of that coming through as well. Um, and so I guess and some people when I speak to them that explanation is why they reach out. Some people it keeps them from reaching out. They feel like they've done their own analysis. It's too far out of reach. There's no reason to explore further. I guess what actually caused you to make the decision to actually reach out to me, not about my firm specifically, but like was there something in your life where you said I need a second opinion or um there's something there where maybe Eric has a different or his system has a different opinion?
I don't remember for sure, but I think I saw one or two of your videos on YouTube. And, not so much the specifics of the system, but just generally the notion that people are more ready than they think they are. And the notion that many, many people work years beyond where they could be retiring. And so that made me think, well, let me find out. Right.
Mm.
And so that's when I reached out to you.
Yeah, that does make sense. Um, you said you were feeling a bit frustrated beforehand. Or I don't know if frustrated is not was frustrated the right word? I don't want to assume or put words in your mouth. When you did your own
I,
analysis.
I think that might have been the word that I used.
Okay.
That it's a fine word. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess beyond the financial plan, I guess actually it sounds like even before even thinking about a financial plan, you were just saying, let me see if I fit into that category of people who are working longer than they need to. Maybe there's another perspective on this, and that's what you wanted. You wanted that perspective.
Yeah. The other thing, by the way, that led me to believe that maybe I am ready is that in your videos and videos of other people
Mhm.
like you, um, there actually are conversations about numbers, right? So it's sort of like, you know, here's an example of somebody who had $1 million. Here's an example of somebody who had $2 million. Will be in another video. Another video will be like, here's an example of somebody who has $2.5 million, and kind of like, oh, and this percentage is in pre-tax and this percentage is in Roth, blah, blah,
Mhm.
blah. But the point is just generally those numbers were numbers that made me feel like, well, I sort of fit into that quantitative category. So if these people can do it, then maybe I'm not so far off.
Yeah, that makes sense. It felt relatable. And so I guess let's say you entered the planning process with us. What were you hoping to get out of that process? And then I'll ask a follow-up afterwards, which is what do you feel you actually got out of the process? And maybe there is some overlap and maybe there's some gaps, but it'd be interesting, I think, for people to hear about that.
'Cause. Well, so the single most important thing that I wanted was to be able to retire. And, you know, not so much the specifics of the system, but just generally the notion that many, many people work years beyond where they could be retiring. And so that made me think, well, let me find out. Right. And so that's when I reached out to you.
Okay.
was to know how long it was going to be until I could practically retire
Hmm.
with a comfortable lifestyle, right? Um, because all of my analysis was I was making it up myself, right? I'm a quant guy, I know about numbers, but I don't know about retirement. And I don't know about all the contingencies and how my spending is going to change during the course of my retirement and how to account for market fluctuations and that kind of stuff. So what I did, if you looked at my spreadsheet, you would see that it looks very complicated, but the fact is that it was a little bit too blunt.
Hmm.
So so more than anything, I wanted to know what's practical for me? What could I do? And then sort of the how we do it is the substantiation, and that's secondary. But really, I needed to. I- One of the things that was very stressful for me was not actually knowing what the number of years was.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so now to the actual practical exercise. What did you find valuable about the practical exercise? What loops did it close or open? The actual exercise we went through of building the income labs scenarios, going through the expense worksheets, all of that material.
Uh, a big part of it was becoming familiar with the guardrail system and understanding that. Because, like, if you had just told me, oh, you can afford to retire next year, I'm not sure I would have believed it because, like, all the math that I've done looks like no, there's too much risk that I'm going to run out of money, right? And that's because I was sort of doing it in a relatively unflexible way. So really, it's about the system itself,
Mm,
as well as you know your personal style of communication and thinking and analysis just happens to be very similar to mine. So you speak in a language that I understand. Um, you know, I I've spent my entire career as a quant guy, so I'm comfortable with numbers and risk and all that, but not in this context. I don't know anything about this context. So,
yeah. No, I remember we had just for context for everyone watching this, Gary, we worked for several years. We did 2 years ago, built the plan, and then you worked for a while longer, and then we reconnected to continue working together when you were closer to actually retiring. And I do remember all the back and forth about the guardrail system and the Kitsis white papers and all of that material. And I totally think that's an understandable and normal perspective for a lot of people working with us because it does rely on a sense of trust for a system that is different than the standard system people look at. And so I'm just bringing that up as evidence that people won't have or part of the story that people won't know because they didn't get a side seat to see us do that. So let me ask this. So now you are retired. Again, people don't know we're kind of rushing the timeline here, but now you are retired for a few months, not long. Obviously, there's many things that you can't speak to because it hasn't been enough time to like fully pressure test everything and experience what that life is. But what helped you get across the threshold to feel comfortable with making that big decision? How do you feel now on the other side?
well, I've got two answers to that question.
Take your time.
But one of them, the primary one, the broad strokes one, is just all of the analysis that we've done, and your guidance, and the your willingness to sort of open up the hood and show me how everything works. Right? Not everyone needs that, but I'm skeptical by nature and I'm quantitatively oriented and I need to see the data and see the analysis and see how it works and understand the contingencies and how we manage risk and all that kind of stuff. So that's one part of the answer. The other part of the answer is, um, this, but people watching don't know. It wasn't my choice about when I would retire, right? Because your recommendation to me was that I could do it in January of 27.
Hmm.
Me, just for sort of to be a little bit conservative, I sort of mentally added 6 months to that and figured I would do it in the middle of 27. Then at the end of 25, I got laid off. Um, Now, I think one of the biggest benefits of having worked with you is a psychological and mental one for me, not even as much, not just the practical stuff. What I mean by that is if we hadn't already worked out a plan, if I'd never been in touch with you and all I'd ever done was like work with my own analysis of my own worksheets and then I got laid off, I would be in a panic because I'm 62. It's harder to get hired. I don't want to be starting over at a new job at this age. And, my belief was that I needed at least several more years before I could retire. So the fact that we'd done all this work and we had a plan in place to retire in 27, to retire a year early just meant minor adjustments.
Yeah. I agree. And I think part of why I wanted to speak to you too is because I do speak about this on the YouTube channel and most people that's where they find me is retirement isn't always our choice. And the exercise you to speak exactly about what you experienced, nothing to do with us, is the fact that were proactive in preparing in advance, not knowing exactly how your retirement would arrive, whether by choice, by your own choice or not by your own choice, was an important variable. And I think it's a very human part of the experience. A lot of people do get laid off and have to make a quick decision, or maybe not laid off, but an early retirement offer. And they need to know can I take this? Can I not? So I thought that's probably why I wanted to speak to you about it. So now on the other side here, I guess, obviously your retirement's a year earlier than expected, maybe 18 months earlier than you thought you would. How do you feel here in the first couple months? What and all the human feelings would be viable, happy, nervous, I don't know, like unadulterated by me. How are you feeling here on the other side?
It's a mix of a lot of things. So, first of all, I am not yet ready to be 100% confident that I don't have to earn anything anymore at all, right?
Yeah.
And that's not strictly rational because we've done all the analysis and I've seen the numbers and I understand the risk and I understand how we're managing the risk. It's just, having spent so many decades scrambling to work and to earn and to save and feeling like anytime I'm not working is unproductive, lost time, and being irresponsible. It's just sort of a mental shift that I haven't made fully. Not that I haven't made it at all, but I haven't made it fully. So I am still really enjoying having some time on my hands. I'm doing some university teaching, which is not a full-time job, but it's occupying me and keeping me mentally engaged. And what I earn is a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of what I was earning in my previous job. But I'm doing stuff that I really enjoy.
Yeah. And I remember
And
right before we go ahead.
the other thing that I'll add to that is I am able to enjoy days. Like if an entire day goes by and I haven't been productive in any way because I've just spent the day lounging and reading, I can feel good about that. And I can be busy like making travel plans and things like that rather than panicking and scrambling to try to find a job. I'm doing exactly the opposite. I'm not worrying about that and I'm enjoying my time.
Yeah, I love that for you. And one thing you just brought to my attention before we just started this call, you play guitar. I knew that, but you mentioned having some time to now not feel pressured. Oh, I can go to the specific open mics that I wanted to, even if it means driving farther. I don't have work the next morning. I thought that's such a cool human thing. At first, I didn't know that. I think it's a great hobby. But second, just like small wins in retirement, even if we don't have all the answers. As you said when we talked initially about doing this, you said, well, I haven't lived before retirement yet. I can't really speak towards the effectiveness or the execution. Totally viable. But even then, we still have these small wins with the free time, the ability to travel and stuff. So I think these are very human wins that can often be overlooked in the kind of grandiosity of planning for 30-year retirement, if that makes sense. I don't know if you have any perspective to share with anybody on that, but that would be my perspective from the outside.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm an amateur guitar player. It doesn't really matter whether I'm very good or not. I play because I love it. And a while back we moved, and so there was a music community up in the area where we used to live. And there's open mics that I used to love to attend, and I've been rarely going because it's like an hour and a half drive. Um, but now I don't have to worry about getting up for work in the morning. So I don't mind getting in the car at 5:30 to arrive there at 7 o'clock and then be there for a few hours and drive home and get home at midnight and not have to worry about getting up in the morning. So it's just one of those little things that's made a big difference in my life.
So cool. Yeah, so cool. Very admirable. Well, to wrap up here, um, what would you say to someone who's in the same position you were before getting started on the financial planning process specifically?
I think it's simple. I think you, if you're where I was a couple of years ago, which is, uncertain about when I can retire, um, you just need to get advice. You need to get advice from an expert. I mean, there are systems and ways to make this work, but the being anxious because of uncertainty isn't necessary. Like at the minimum, just start with an initial consultation and just sort of understand what might be possible.